Story 1. That Thing Behind the Eyes. Dr. Martin Greaves hadn't practiced in almost 3 years. Not since the Hendricks case, when the court declared him incompetent for failing to report signs of abuse in a patient. He still read journals, he still had his license, technically, but no hospital would touch him. So when the call came from a private clinic in Bangor, offering quiet, off-the-books work, he said yes without asking too many questions. Pride was a luxury, rent wasn't. The boy's name was Ethan Cross, 8 years old, thin, pale, with nervous hands and eyes too big for his face. His mother brought him in. Amanda Cross, single parent, overworked and brittle. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Ethan barely spoke at first, just sat in the corner of Martin's office, knees pulled up to his chest, like something was going to reach out and grab him from under the floor. It was the third session when Ethan finally spoke. "I'm not alone in here," he said, tapping his temple. Martin leaned forward. "What do you mean, Ethan?" "There's someone else," the boy said. "He lives behind my eyes." Martin smiled gently. "A voice? Like a friend?" Ethan shook his head violently. "Not a friend. He doesn't like me. He talks at night. He says mean things. He says I'm soft, that I'm just a skin suit." Martin had heard similar things before. Imaginary friends, dissociative patterns, even schizophrenia in rare pediatric cases. But this didn't feel like that. Ethan didn't show the usual signs. He was grounded, smart, almost painfully aware of what was happening to him. And the fear wasn't vague or theatrical, it was focused, sharp, like he knew exactly what he was afraid of. The sessions continued, and the story grew teeth. The voice had a name, Jonas. He spoke mostly at night, but sometimes during school too. Jonas didn't want Ethan to talk to Martin. Jonas said Martin was like the others, and that the last one died screaming. Amanda said Ethan had started sleepwalking, waking up in the backyard, barefoot in the frost. Then Martin began to hear it. It started as a whisper, not from the boy, but in Martin's own dreams. He'd wake up with fragments in his mind. "You're wasting your time," or "He belongs to me now." At first, he thought it was just stress, his subconscious playing tricks. He tried not to dwell on it, but the whispers followed him into the daytime. Once, while washing his hands in the clinic restroom, the mirror flickered. Just a second. But in that second, his reflection smiled, while he didn't. He told no one. By the 7th session, Ethan looked worse. Dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped, like a boy twice his age. "He's getting stronger," he said. "He says he'll come out soon," Martin pressed, trying to understand what that meant. Come out? "Ethan, what would that look like?" Ethan looked up and Martin swore. For just a moment, his eyes weren't brown anymore. They were black, slick, like oil. "You'll see," the boy whispered. That night, Martin dreamed of a door behind Ethan's eyes. A real, wooden door, nailed shut with rusty boards. Something thumped behind it, slow and steady, like a giant heartbeat. Then came a voice, deep and full of teeth. "You're not ready," it said. "But soon." He woke up gasping. Martin stopped sleeping. He started recording their sessions, watching them over and over late at night. In one video, at exactly 42 minutes in, there was a glitch, a half-second frame where Ethan's face blurred, warped. For a moment, it looked like two faces overlapping. One was Ethan. The other was older, cruel, smiling. Martin took it to the clinic director, a tired man named Harlan, who looked through the footage with bloodshot eyes. When it was over, Harlan rubbed his temples and said, "This kid's been through 3 therapists in 2 months. The last one broke down and checked herself into St. Mary's psych unit." Martin wanted to quit, but something wouldn't let him. Maybe it was guilt over the Hendricks case. Maybe it was the whisper that now spoke, even when Ethan wasn't around. He was walking home from the clinic one foggy Thursday when he heard it again, right behind his ear, cold breath. On the skin, "You're next." He spun around. No one, just empty sidewalk and frost on the windows. Martin started seeing Ethan outside of sessions, once in the grocery store, but the boy didn't look at him. just stood in front of a meat display, staring at the glass, not blinking. Another time, he saw Ethan across the street from his apartment, standing under a flickering streetlight. The boy grinned, then turned, and walked into the dark. The final session began like the others. Ethan sat in silence. Martin pressed him with gentle questions. Then, Ethan tilted his head and said, "Dr. Graves isn't here anymore." Martin froze. Ethan smiled. But it wasn't the boy's smile. It was older, wiser, hungry. "You brought me out," the thing said. "All that attention, all that belief, it was like feeding me warm blood. And now I'm not behind the eyes anymore. Now I'm in the skin." Martin backed away. "You're not Ethan." "No," the thing said, "but Ethan is still here, just further back now." Martin ran. He left the clinic, drove all night, ended up at a roadside motel in New Hampshire. He locked the door, pulled the curtains, left the TV on to drown out the whisperers. He still hears them. Sometimes in mirrors, sometimes in the silence between raindrops. Ethan's face on the news last week, smiling, standing next to his new stepfather, who died 3 days later in what police are calling a brutal, unexplained incident. Martin knows what's happening. Jonas isn't just one thing, he's many. He spreads through the mind, through eye contact, through belief. And Martin was the doorway. Now, some nights, Martin looks in the mirror and sees someone else behind his eyes, if he doesn't know the name yet, but it's whispering, and it wants out. Story 2, second house on Mill Street. When Claire McConnell first pulled up to the house on Mill Street, she thought it was perfect. 2 stories, wraparound porch, white siding with green trim faded just right to feel cozy instead of neglected. It looked like something from an old postcard. There was a big maple tree in the front yard and a cracked sidewalk leading up to the porch. The place was cheap, almost suspiciously cheap, but Claire had just taken a job teaching English at the middle school in Greeley, Maine, and she didn't have the luxury of being picky. The landlord was a man named Mr. Dobbs who spoke slowly and smiled too much. When she signed the lease, he looked at her with these watery blue eyes and said, "Don't mind what the townsfolk say. Some of them like to make up stories." She didn't understand what that meant until a week later. It started with little things. She'd tell people where she lived and they'd frown or look confused. "You mean the old Peters house?" someone at the grocery store asked. "No," Claire said, "it's just the second house on Mill Street." "There ain't no second house," the cashier said. "Only the big white one with the porch." "That's the one," Claire said. The woman's expression didn't change. "That house was torn down years ago," Claire laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. But it kept happening. The school secretary looked at her like she'd grown a second head when she mentioned the address. A man at the hardware store refused to sell her a new doorknob when she told him where it was going. "That place doesn't exist," he said flatly. And yet, every evening Claire drove home, there it was. The second house on Mill Street. Porch light flickering, mailbox leaning slightly to the left, her name freshly painted on the slot, Claire McConnell. The first letter arrived 2 weeks after she moved in. No stamp, no return address. Just a yellowed envelope with the name Margaret written in looping cursive. Inside was a letter dated March 3, 1951. The paper was fragile and smelled like old libraries. The handwriting was neat and slanted, the kind no one teaches anymore. "Dear Margaret, he came again last night. I heard the creak on the stairs. I swear I bolted the door, but he still found a way in. He never speaks, just stands at the foot of the bed, watching. I think it's getting stronger. I don't know how much longer I can stay here." Claire stared at it for a long time. It had to be some kind of joke. A leftover Halloween prank. She checked the envelope again. No postage. No address. And yet, it had come through the slot, crisp and deliberate, like someone had placed it there by hand. She asked her neighbor, a heavy-set man named Ron, who smoked on his porch every night, if he'd seen anyone delivering mail. Ron squinted at her. "What house?" "Mine," she said. "The one next to you." He looked confused. "There's just a vacant lot next door." Claire followed his gaze, and for one terrifying moment, she almost saw it, too. Just a patch of overgrown weeds and a sagging fence. Then she blinked, and her house was back. Another letter came the next day. Margaret, I hear him now even when I'm awake. In the walls, in the pipes. He whispers my name like it's a curse. Do you remember the girl who used to live here before me? I think he did something to her. Please, don't let them forget me. Eclair's sleep began to erode. She started hearing tapping at night. Not the normal creaks of an old house. These were steady, deliberate, like fingers drumming against wood. Once, she swore she heard breathing under the floorboards. She opened the door to the basement only once, and the cold that came out felt too deep for a single-story foundation. It felt bottomless. She called Mr. Dobbs, but the number just rang and rang. At the library, she searched old property records. There was no listing for the second house on Mill Street, not in the last 20 years. No history, no owners. It simply didn't exist on paper. But buried in the archives, she found a grainy black and white photo from 1951, 3 houses lined up on Mill Street. One of them was hers, and written in the caption, Evangeline Beach, found deceased in her home. Apparent suicide, March 5th, 1951. The initials matched E. She drove home slowly that night, hands shaking on the wheel. When she got inside, there was a letter on the floor. This one was shorter. Margaret, I tried to leave, but the house doesn't let you. I walked for hours. Every road brings me back. I think he's in the house. I think I let him in. I'm sorry. Claire packed her bags. She didn't care about the lease. She didn't care about the money. But when she opened the front door, the street outside was wrong. Empty, silent, too quiet for 5 in the afternoon. No cars, no wind, just stillness. Like a photograph. And the house behind her groaned, almost pleased. She slammed the door shut and backed away, heart pounding. The lights flickered. The radio in the kitchen turned on by itself, tuning in to static, then to a voice she didn't recognize, whispering something in a language she didn't know, something hungry. She ran upstairs to grab her phone, but in the hallway there was a shadow that didn't belong to her. It stretched the wrong way, curled along the wall like smoke. She didn't look back. She ran into the bathroom and locked the door, even though the lock barely worked. And now, she waits. It's been hours. Or days. The windows show nothing, just black, like someone painted over the glass. The mail slot just clattered, a new envelope. Not yellowed. Fresh. Her name on it. She hasn't opened it yet. She's too afraid of what it might say. Or worse, what might be standing at the foot of her bed when she finally sleeps. Story 3. Under the Floorboards. When Mr. Elliot Granger arrived at Langdon Academy, it was snowing. Fat flakes that fell without wind, quiet as whispers. The school sat just outside of Barrows Hill, a forgotten corner of rural Massachusetts. The buildings were stone and wood, old enough to have ghosts, and the trees around the campus leaned in like they were trying to listen. It was the kind of place where time didn't move quite right. Elliot had taken the job last minute after a phone call from a desperate headmaster and a salary he couldn't say no to, teaching English to juniors and seniors, room and board included. Historic campus, the ad said, a tradition of excellence. They didn't mention the smell in the hallways, like mold and old pennies, or the way the floors creaked even when no one was walking on them. His room was on the 3rd floor of the East Dormitory. Narrow bed, radiator that hissed like it had secrets, and wooden floors that groaned under every step. The moment he set his suitcase down, he felt it, not a sound, but a feeling, like something just beneath the floor shifted slightly to get comfortable. The headmaster, Mr. Lowell, was a stiff man with watery eyes and a handshake like wet paper. "We ask a lot of our faculty," he said during their first meeting, "but you'll find the students respectful, and we don't tolerate nonsense." He didn't smile when he said it. The nonsense, Elliot soon learned, was the students whispering about kids who went missing. The first was a girl named Rachel, then a sophomore boy named Lucas. No one ever said they were missing outright, but their names stopped showing up on the roll call. Desks stayed empty. Beds were made and untouched. When Elliot asked, other teachers gave him blank looks or changed the subject. "Probably withdrawn," someone muttered. But the students told a different story. In quiet moments, between classes, or in hushed voices at lunch, they told him about the creaking sounds at night and the cold spots and how sometimes When it was really late, you could hear knocking from underneath the floors. They say the school was built on something old, one girl said. Her name was Jamie. Smart, shy, always reading Lovecraft. Older than the town, older than anything we know. There's something under us, something that eats. Elliot didn't believe in monsters. He believed in grief and trauma, in overactive imaginations, in the way isolation and bad weather could mess with your head. He'd lived through worse, but the dreams started on his second week. Dark, wet places. The sound of wood splintering. The feeling of nails dragging along his legs as he tried to run. Then one night, he woke to a sound that wasn't just creaking. It was breathing. Deep, slow, raspy. Coming from under the floorboards. He got out of bed and pressed his ear to the ground. Silence. Then, faint but real, a whisper. Hungry. He jumped back, heart pounding. The floorboards seemed darker now, like something beneath the varnish was moving. That was when he noticed the patterns in the wood. At first, he thought they were just knots, the kind you get with old planks. But now, he saw they formed shapes. Circles, spirals, teeth. The next day, another student was gone. No warning, no explanation, just not there anymore. Jamie told him she saw something in the hallway the night before, a shadow that moved like smoke, slipping into the cracks in the floor. Elliot tried to talk to the headmaster again. Lowell smiled, but his eyes didn't. The school has its rhythms, Mr. Granger. Best not to interfere. That night, Elliot didn't sleep. He sat up with the flashlight and watched the floor. At 3:12 a.m. exactly, the wood near his bed lifted slightly, not much, less than an inch, but enough to let a long, pale hand push through. He screamed. The hand froze, then sank back down. The floor settled like nothing had happened. He packed his bags at dawn, but when he opened the door to leave, it wasn't the hallway outside. It was dark. The air smelled like earth and iron. He reached out and touched bark? No, not bark. Flesh, textured like wood, but warm and pulsing. He closed the door, backed away, heart racing. The school wouldn't let him leave. He began marking time. Every 3 nights, a student disappeared. No one spoke about them after. Their things vanished, their names were erased from the rosters. The other teachers looked more tired each day, like they were being drained. Jamie was the one who figured it out. It's not the school, she said, eyes wide. It's the floor, the foundation. It's alive, and it needs us. They tried to warn others. They tried to escape, but the school always shifted when you tried to leave. Roads looped. Phones didn't work. Letters never arrived. The town outside acted like Langdon Academy didn't exist. One night, Jamie was taken. Elliot heard her screaming through the walls, then silence. The next day, her room was empty. No one remembered her. Now Elliot's the last new hire. The other teachers are too tired to talk. He stopped trying to leave. He just listens at night, waiting for the breathing, for the hand to reach through again. Sometimes he whispers back. Sometimes the floor whispers his name, because now he understands. It doesn't just feed on bodies. It feeds on fear, on secrets, on time, and he's been under the floorboards this whole time.